Today we're going to talk about the visual arts in relation to how we as teachers can set up quality experiences and promote the experiences using quality interactions. First, we're going to start off reviewing developmentally appropriate practice and to what we learned last week. Then we'll move into talking about how to provide quality experiences with the visual arts and the appropriate interactions that we can utilize in the classroom to support them. Finally, we'll explore some different art activities that you can utilize for each of the different age groups. So let's think about developmentally appropriate practice. And what were your takeaways from the last module? When you engaged in discussion with each other within your group, as well as within the class, you've probably noticed that some of you had some similar experiences, but others had very different experiences. Some of you were provided a specific set of tools or instructions to go by, while others were provided a little more open-ended creativity to create what they wanted. This illustrates the principle of not focusing on what's right or wrong, but rather focusing on what's the best possible way to teach children. If we focus on keeping things open-ended and hands-on and allowing for that creativity and thought process to flow, then children are going to gain more from the experience. Even if what you learned was frustration because you weren't sure how to draw something, it still forced you to figure out how to push through that frustration. So you learned perseverance as well as how to go about and tackling the problem in a way that's best suited for you. So let's continue to build on that. One of your activities for this module is a short video clip by Bev Boss. She's going to share a little more information on the importance of keeping things open-ended and the unconventional use of materials. This clip is from her video starting at square one. So how does all of this reinforce what we talked about last time? Let's move on to how do we provide quality experiences to answer that question. One of the things that we learned about last time is how to choose the right materials for the age group that you're working with, or with where the children are at developmentally. It focused on choosing safe yet appropriate materials that the children can utilize on their own to promote those hands-on experiences. In addition to that, we also looked at how to set up the environment to support individual use of those materials without so much teacher direction. But the big thing that you can do as a teacher is to provide children the time that they need to create. So don't rush them. This is why dedicated free play in your daily schedule is so important, because it allows the child the time to initiate those activities that they want to engage in and not feel rushed in the process. The other thing we want to do is we want to focus on the process. I know we talked a little bit about this in product versus process art, but this goes for any of the visual arts and not just the creative arts. You really want children to focus on how do I work through the problem to get the end result that I see versus focusing on creating the product that the teacher wants us to create. This directly relates to last module's lecture and that we need to choose appropriate materials, then create a supportive environment where children can utilize those things with little to no direction. The other thing you want to think about is not directing the experience. So you want to try to capitalize on those teachable moments. A teachable moment is where the children will offer some sort of thought or idea in regards to something. You as the teacher help them ponder that. Now, this doesn't mean that as the teacher, if they ask a question, that you immediately have to have a response. If you're not sure about something, offer to the child to look it up. So then you can bring some new books and resources into the classroom and you all can research it together. Even if you have some knowledge on the topic, you can share your knowledge with the child, but the important thing is regardless of how much knowledge you have, you're bringing the resources into the classroom so that you and the children can collect the information and discuss it together. Sometimes these teachable moments can span months, depending on if it turns into a comprehensive study. Other times, it can be more or less a quick thing. If they're looking for a way to stabilize a block structure, maybe you ask them the question of, well, what do you think we need? How do you think we could make this work? And then you can determine together in talking about the different options, and maybe the solution is you need something that's a few inches long and pretty sturdy. And then you and the children can essentially go on a treasure hunt around the classroom to find objects that may fit to help stabilize their structure. This is also related to the thought that we want to promote unconventional use of materials. As teachers, we need to be flexible. We need to be open-minded and willing to try out children's ideas, even if we know in the back of our head that it's not going to work. The important piece is that the children figure out why it doesn't work so that they have that foundation of knowledge moving forward. Whereas if we give it directly to them, they're less likely to use it in the future. So this all goes back to utilizing those hands-on, open-ended explorations versus essentially copying or doing as the teacher says. So how can you help promote all of this? One idea is to move materials from one area to another, meaning that if you have a child who's working in the block area, and they're wanting to construct something, maybe you add some paper and some pens or pencils or markers and crayons in a small basket so that they can utilize those to draw diagrams or blueprints or draw out their ideas before constructing them, just like an architect does. Another idea is to save the children's work so that they can come back to it later on. Remember, we don't want to rush the children. So if you have a program where you offer all-day care and you have space in the environment to do this, I highly recommend it. You're going to see lots of cool and different things happening, especially as they expand on it over time. Now, if you're in a classroom that's a little bit smaller or you're in a part-day program, one of the better things that you can do is to encourage children to draw out what they created so that they can come back to it later. Or if they don't want to, I always had a camera ready and available to take pictures of what they had created so that we could print them off and they could use those to help reconstruct what they built and then expand on it. Another idea would be to create name cards for the children to put next to their work so that they can come back to it later. Now, this is not to say that the children were able to put their name card on something because they didn't want someone else to play with it, but rather the children could come back to it later on. If they were done with it, then the expectation was that they put their items away. If you're going to utilize this method, you'll need to set up some expectations with the children prior to implementing it so they understand what their role and responsibility is. Next, let's look at quality interactions. One of the easiest things that you can do to support children's exploration is to describe their actions. This lets them know that you see what they're doing and that you value the contributions that they are making. So you can tell them, I see you used red and green crayons. Tell me what made you choose those. Or you can ask lots of open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are questions that start with who, what, when, where, and how. We typically want to avoid asking why because it's more of an abstract thought. We can rephrase the question to start with what made you choose the material that you're choosing, or how did you go about that? Avoid asking what is it, so to not label children's work. When you ask, what is it? Then you're asking them to give you an answer or to make a determination of what it is they created on the spot. Many a times, children do not know what it is they've created until after they've finished their masterpiece. I have even experienced where children will want to tell me about their picture after they've created it and they change their mind 3 times. So we want to continue to promote that thought process and that creativity and them thinking about what it is that they've created on their own terms, not on our terms. So rather than asking, what is it? Ask them, tell me about your drawing. Then that way it gives them a little more freedom to answer the question. So going back to introducing new materials, you can identify what it is you're introducing into the environment. And when I say show them how to experiment with it, this is not showing them how to use it, but rather talking about the properties of the specific material and coming up with different ways that they might be able to use it and encouraging them to experiment with it and try other ways than what you had talked about. This way, you're not pigeonholing one use of the material, but rather allowing the children to determine how they want to use the material. The other thing to keep in mind is that you want to use appropriate words for the materials and or the processes so that they can make the connections of what it is and how it might actually be used and how we might be able to use it. A good example of this is plunger art, to where you're using small plungers. You can talk about how it suctions up and down. You can talk about how it rolls. You can talk about how the bottom is made out of more of a pliable material, and you can even introduce maybe what pliable means and that it's flexible. And then you can talk about what the handle is made out of or what kind of material it is. Is it wood? Is it a hard plastic? Then that way you're introducing these new concepts to children without necessarily telling them specifically what to do or how to use it. So now it's exploration time. One of the activities that you're going to work on for this module is making Play-Doh. I love homemade Play-Doh because it's so much softer and more pliable than store-bought Play-Doh. It smells better, it feels better, and honestly, it usually lasts a lot longer. When I taught this class last fall, I challenged all of the students to bring their Play-Doh into their classroom to really put it to the test. I'm going to challenge you to do the same, and hopefully you will end up with similar results as they did. This is a great cooking opportunity that you can bring into the classroom. Now, you may not be able to do the heated Play-Doh, but you could at least mix everything together and then you can cook it separately away from the children. But you can talk about measurement, you can talk about what the ingredients looked like before and then after the heated process, as well as the properties of the ingredients themselves. The children could even choose what color they want to make it. You can use liquid watercolor or you can use food coloring. But what's helpful and with you doing this ahead of time is that you are having an opportunity to go through the process first to think about the different types of questions you might be able to ask the children as they experience it. The other recipe is a no-cook Play-Doh. As you create both, you're going to compare both. I'm really interested to see what your thoughts are on what your preference is. The no-cook Play-Doh is great, especially if you can't use those heating elements in your program, but I will go ahead and give a spoiler and that there is a big difference between the two, but I'm going to let you figure out what that difference is. So let's talk about some other activities that you can do with children. One is finger painting. Children love to finger paint, and you as a teacher need to allow the messiness in your classroom. I know it's not an easy task, and it's probably not what you really want to do, but children absolutely love it. Woodworking is a great one to introduce with your preschoolers, but if they're not ready, introduce pounding in your classroom with the Play-Doh and some small tools such as hammers, rolling pins, popsicle sticks. You can even use safety scissors on the Play-Doh to start introducing them to those concepts to make woodworking successful later on. Collages are a great one. Another trick to the trade with the collages, and even in any other art activity, is with the glue. So glue properties still remain the same even when diluted in a 1-to-1 ratio with water, meaning that you're using half water and half glue. Then what you can do with it is store it in airtight containers when not in use, but open those containers up and leave them out for the children to utilize during their projects. Use a paintbrush with it. The paintbrushes are easy to clean off, they're reusable, but the best part about this is that children get to utilize as much as they need or want. When you use the glue bottles, children tend to be wasteful, and as a teacher, if we're trying to keep things open-ended, we don't want to be stepping in and telling them, oh, you're using too much glue. We want them to be able to do it on their own. But we also want to make sure that we're being good stewards of our resources. Children don't learn how much is too much until elementary school. And glue sticks, well, they just don't tend to stick very well. That's it for this module's lecture, so please remember to watch the Bev Boz video and complete your activities. I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are in the discussion boards. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me.